Hey guys, tonight we begin in a village where the sky has forgotten how to cry. You stand at the edge of a rice field that looks more like a cracked clay bowl than anything capable of growing life. Dust creeps up between your toes. Even the wind feels dry like someone exhaling through linen. Chickens peck at nothing. Old women squint at the sky as if scolding it. And the men, they've already chewed their lips down to silence. It's Korea, it's the 1400s, and it hasn't rained in weeks. The first thing you notice is the quiet. No frogs, no distant thunder, just the restless shuffle of neighbors whispering old stories. Some say the Dragon King is sleeping. Others mutter about offended spirits, forgotten offerings, or the fact that the new magistrate smells like vinegar and curses under his breath. You feel it too, that thick pressure in the air like the sky itself is sulking. Everything is coated in that pre-monsoon tension. If only the clouds would crack. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The village elder shuffles past with a cloth-wrapped bundle. You follow him to the dry riverbed. It should be bustling with water-laughter ducks. But now, just flat stones and a lingering smell of desperation. He kneels and opens the cloth inside rice-dried fish, a few coins, and a ginseng root so old it looks like a tiny angry man. He arranges the items on a flat rock bows once and speaks softly. "Rain, please," before we all disappear. No ceremony, no audience, just a man in the sky and an offering. This is how rain begins, not with thunder but with hope. Back in town, the communal well has been rationed. A boy drags a half-full jar across the square. His sandals slap with each step. A dog follows tongue-lolling eyes locked on the sloshing water like it's a roast duck. You hear your stomach growl. You're not even sure if it's hunger or thirst anymore. In the market stalls are open but bare. Where there were once greens, there are now roots. Where there were once fruits, there is now salted cabbage clinging to relevance. You spot a vendor selling old radishes now soft and blushing purple. His sign says, "Still edible." Probably. You turn to leave but bump into a bronze bell hanging low from the rafters. It rings out a dull, sleepy tone. People stop. Look, then turn away. Nothing new, just a reminder. Later that evening, the village gathers for an impromptu meeting. The magistrate stands on a raised wooden platform flanked by two scribes and a very wilted parasol. He tries to look calm, but his robe clings to his skin like wet parchment. "People of Guangchon," he begins, voice cracking like the fields we've sent word to the capital. "The king has been informed of our situation." Murmurs ripple through the crowd, a few hopeful, most tired. He continues. "In the meantime, we must begin local offerings. Tomorrow the shrine priest will lead a ritual. We ask that all families contribute something: rice cloth, ginseng, or prayer." A woman raises her hand. "What if we have none left?" The magistrate pauses, then pray harder. No one laughs. Not even Guillaume the butcher, who usually chuckles at funerals. You spend the night on a mat under a leaking roof. Irony. You're thirsty and your ceiling finally lets water in, but it's from a cracked jug, not the sky. You try to sleep, but dreams are strange under a dry moon. You imagine clouds forming over your belly, thunder in your ears, lightning striking the bread you haven't eaten. The rooster crows far too early, but you rise anyway, because today might be the day. The ritual is set at the forest shrine, an old one, moss-covered and quiet. You walk with the others along a narrow path lined with trees that look almost embarrassed by their wilted leaves. Birds chirp, but it sounds more like complaint than song. At the shrine, incense curls up in lazy spirals. The priest appears clad in plain white with a cap shaped like a folded boat. He bows to the crowd, then to the altar, and begins. He chants. He sways. He tosses powdered herbs into a fire that doesn't want to start. And finally, he lifts a bowl of clean water above his head and tips it slowly, letting the drops fall onto the dry earth. It soaks in instantly, gone before it can glisten. You feel something twist in your chest. Not grief, not frustration. Something older. A memory of rain on a tin roof, of soup bubbling, of a shirt that clings because you were caught in a downpour and you didn't care. The ritual ends, people bow, some linger. You linger because maybe this is how it begins. Historians still argue whether these local rain rituals were truly effective or just psychological glue, something to hold a community together through nature's indifference. Some say the real power lay in the shared hope, not the act. Others insist the rituals carried echoes of older shamanic practices long before Confucianism tried to tidy everything up. You don't know which is true, but you do know this: the priest's hands were shaking when he poured that water, and the crowd silent as they were held their breath until the last drop hit the earth. You walk back to the village slowly. The wind smells the same, but your heart feels lighter. You wake up the next morning to a rooster that sounds like it's reconsidering its career. The sky is still a sullen stretch of pale silk, not a cloud in sight. But something's shifted. Maybe it's the air. Maybe it's your mood. Maybe it's the faint scent of sesame oil from your neighbor's kitchen promising that someone's still got enough to fry. You head to the bakery not to buy anything. There's barely flour, but to listen. That's what people do now. They gather and talk and pretend that talking might squeeze moisture from the clouds. Gaius, the local potter, not the Roman one, don't get confused, shares that he once saw a village where the people shouted at the sky until it cried. Did it work, someone asks. He shrugs. Well, it rained. But they also tore up all their clothes and threw radishes. You nod thoughtfully like you've just heard wisdom instead of potential heat stroke. That's when the village elder speaks again. Quiet, calm, but firm. It's time to inform the court. The room stills. This is a big deal. In medieval Korea, particularly during the Goryeo and early Joseon dynasties, drought wasn't just a weather inconvenience. It was a divine rebuke. A monarch's worth was partially measured by whether or not the heavens seemed pleased. No rain. Clearly something at the top was crooked. You offer to help carry the message to the local administrator. The journey isn't far, but it takes you through the outer farm's parched hills, where even the grass curls like old parchment. Farmers nod to you as you pass. No words, just dust-lined faces and that tight-lipped hope you've seen too often. The magistrate accepts your scroll with the exhausted grace of someone who's already read a dozen. He unfurls it, reads it slowly, and sighs. Very well, he says, dabbing ink onto parchment. I'll forward it to the capital. You thank him, bow, and begin the walk back. It's hotter now. Your clothes cling. Somewhere a child is crying, probably told there's no rice for porridge today. You don't stop walking. By the time you return, a small crowd has gathered near the shrine again. Someone's brought a flute. Another's carrying a fan made of woven reeds decorated with lotus flowers and cranes. The priest is absent, probably recovering from yesterday, but the people don't wait. Instead, they begin to chant, softly at first, then louder, a low rhythmic murmur that builds like waves. You don't know all the words, but you recognize their shape, an invocation to the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea, supposed ruler of tides, clouds, and sky tears. You join in? Because rain is democratic. It doesn't care who chants, only that someone does. Afterward, people linger again. No one wants to break the spell, but slowly, one by one, they drift away. You head to the well and find it lower than before. You fetch just enough for the evening. Your bucket's squeak sounds too loud in the silence. That night, you overhear a merchant say that the king is preparing to perform Gizo, the royal rain rite. That gets attention. Everyone stops slurping their broth or licking their cracked lips. The Gizo is no ordinary ritual. Performed only during times of dire need, it involves the monarch himself stepping away from the palace comforts and offering himself quite literally to the heavens. No feasts, no robes, no throne, just humility. Sometimes the king fasts. Sometimes he sleeps on the floor. Sometimes he visits a sacred altar outside the city walls and prays beneath the open sky with nothing but an incense burner and a water jar. You imagine it. A king stripped of silks kneeling on stone while the wind rustles his hair. His ministers watching in stiff silence, trying not to sneeze from the incense. His sandals muddy, his stomach rumbling. Not exactly how most people picture royalty. But this is medieval Korea, where rulers were supposed to be moral beacons. Their virtue was reflected in nature. If the cosmos was unhappy, maybe the king was too indulgent. Or maybe someone in court was hoarding grain. Either way, the monarch took the blame. Historians still argue whether these rites were genuine acts of piety or carefully staged PR. Some records describe kings collapsing from fasting. Others mention last-minute substitutions an official sent to kneel in the rain's place. But one thing is clear: the people believed in it. Back in your village, someone has chalked a spiral into the dry earth near the square. No one claims it. But more appear by morning. Spiral circles, wave marks. A silent hope drawn into dust. You kneel beside one. Trace it gently with your finger. It's a good symbol, open-ended, eternal, like water's path, like clouds wandering. You stay there until someone calls your name. It's Corvinus, he's holding a jar. It's started, he says. You blink. Rain. He shakes his head. No, the Gizo. They're lighting the incense now. And somehow even that feels like momentum. You nod. Tomorrow, maybe. Tonight you pour your last cup of water. It's warm, a little cloudy. But it tastes like possibility. You rise to the soft sound of tapping. Not rain. Just wine tugging loose bamboo against your window like someone gently reminding you the sky still hasn't delivered. You stretch, breathe in the morning, and find it less brittle than before. There's a dampness to the air, not wet, not quite, but definitely not dry. You step outside. Everyone else has already beaten you to it. The baker has her loaves on display earlier than usual. The rice seller for once doesn't shout. He just gestures upward with his chin and mutters, "She's thinking about it." She meaning the sky, of course. Everyone treats it like a moody aunt. You're never sure if she's coming to bless you or scold you, but you keep the good teacups ready just in case. Today is market day. Normally it would be filled with the smell of sizzling rice cakes, hawkers shouting about fish, and children darting underfoot like loose coins. But now it's quieter, softer. Every motion feels careful, like the entire village doesn't want to spook the clouds. You wander between stalls. A potter is selling cloud-shaped incense burners. A butcher offers dried strips of meat blessed with dryness. Even the tailor has pinned tiny umbrella symbols onto her sashes. Gimmicks maybe, but the customers buy them. Everyone needs to feel like they're doing something. Near the edge of the square, you hear the low chant of a monk. Not from the village. A traveler, maybe. He sits beneath a pine tree, bald head, glinting bowl beside him empty save for a single wet leaf. You pause. He opens one eye. The sky listens best, he says, when the ground is quiet. You nod, drop a coin in his bowl, and move on. At the far end of the square, the mayor, stooped, leathery, and permanently scowling, is arranging a set of bronze mirrors. Rain mirrors, a tradition from older times, especially among those who favored Taoist rites over Buddhist ones. The idea was that if the sky saw its reflection, it might become bashful and cry. You resist the urge to laugh, but it's oddly poetic. The sun peeks out briefly and sends a glint flashing across the bronze straight into your eyes. You blink, look up. A cloud moves across the sun. Not much, but enough to raise eyebrows. Gaius, who has appeared from somewhere with a pastry in each hand, points dramatically. She blinked. Lucilla groans. We're hallucinating. But she keeps watching. That afternoon, the air gets heavier. People start to whisper again. About omens, about signs. About rain dragons circling invisible above the mountains, tails curled around thunder. You sit on a stone wall watching a group of elders debate whether the king's prayers have been long enough. He should have fasted 3 more days, one insists. No, another says the priests didn't burn enough mugwort. A third sighs. It's the astrologers. They didn't align the ceremony with the proper stars. Always the stars. Historians still argue whether these rituals were genuinely mystical or simply expressions of cosmic bureaucracy. Align this. Burn that. Face east, hum in C-sharp. The ingredients varied, but the goal remained the same: make the sky weep. The wind shifts. You wake up to clouds. Not many, not thunderous, but they're wisps and streaks and faint silver patches smudging the blue, like someone's tried half-heartedly to watercolor the sky. It's enough to get people talking. You step outside and already your neighbor is pointing upward, squinting dramatically. See that one, she says. Looks like a dragon with a very full belly. You nod. Because in times like this, clouds aren't just clouds. They're signs, signals, warnings, blessings. Everyone sees what they want to see. At the bakery, Lucilla is back to kneading. She looks up, shrugs, and says, "Don't get too excited. It's probably just sky mold." Still, she leaves the door open, just in case the wind wants to bring anything in. You make your way to the shrine again, this time with Gaius in tow. He's carrying a reed bundle wrapped in cloth. Part offering, part superstition. Part can't hurt. You pass others on the road. One woman's holding a baby with a flower crown. A boy has tied fish bones onto his belt to make the gods laugh. Another man hums a tune in 7 beats. 7 for rain, he tells you solemnly, even though no one knows where that comes from. The shrine is quiet today. No ceremony, just presence. People standing, sitting, whispering. A few tears, a few jokes. One man tries to start a rain dance, but trips over his own sandals and takes it as an omen to stop. You sit on a stone bench worn smooth by years of waiting. And you think this is what rituals are. Waiting together. A kind of community-shaped umbrella. It might not work, but at least no one's waiting alone. You remember something from A Merchant's Tale. In parts of the Korean peninsula long before the Joseon dynasty, shamans would climb mountains and sleep at the peak until clouds appeared. Sometimes they wore white. Sometimes they smeared their faces with ash or salt. Always they carried water from 7 different wells and drank it as a promise to the heavens. You wonder what that tasted like. Probably awful, but powerful. Historians still argue whether those shamans were fully religious figures or closer to weather monks, half spiritual, half scientific. What's known is that they were respected, feared, occasionally ridiculed. and often successful, though no one dare to track the failure rate. Back in the village, the atmosphere has changed. It's like everyone's pretending not to hope. No one says it'll rain, they just nod more, stir slower, pause when they see the horizon. That afternoon, you join a group weaving straw figures. Not for decoration, these are Gokdu spirits meant to be burned or buried to call forth balance. Some look human. Others resemble snakes, dragons, or strange creatures with bulging eyes and 4 fingers. Corvinus makes one with 7 toes. When asked, he says extra grip, for climbing the clouds. No one corrects him. You finish your figure long thin with a spiral on the chest and offer it to the fire pit. Others follow. One by one, the straw catches. Pops. Smokes. And as the wind shifts, carrying the scent of char and hope into the sky, you swear the clouds gather. Just a little. Someone starts humming again. The 7-beat rhythm, you tap your knee to it. Another person adds harmony, then another. It builds not loud but warm, like rising dough. Like something ancient stirring its limbs after a long nap. You watch the sky. Nothing falls. But it feels closer. That night you can't sleep. The air feels thick again, but not like before, not the dry, angry heat of despair. More like anticipation. A held breath. You step outside barefoot. The ground is still cracked, but it smells different. Faint, fresh, almost imaginary. The moon hides behind a cloud. You whisper good to no one in particular. Back inside, you light a single lamp. Not bright. Just enough to see the spiral someone drew on your door. You didn't do it. You don't mind. You sit hands in your lap and imagine the king again. Kneeling. Waiting. Silent like you. Maybe thousands of others across the kingdom doing the same. You wonder if the sky knows how many people are watching. If clouds get stage fright. You chuckle softly. Then close your eyes. You dream of mist. Not rain yet, just the suggestion of it. Enough to keep you smiling in your sleep. You rise to the soft sound of tapping. Not rain. Just wine tugging loose bamboo against your window like someone gently reminding you the sky still hasn't delivered. You stretch, breathe in the morning and find it less brittle than before. There's a dampness to the air. Not wet, not quite, but definitely not dry. You step outside. Everyone else has already beaten you to it. The baker has her loaves on display earlier than usual. The rice seller for once doesn't shout. He just gestures upward with his chin and mutters, "She's thinking about it." She meaning the sky, of course. Everyone treats it like a moody aunt. You're never sure if she's coming to bless you or scold you, but you keep the good teacups ready just in case. Today is market day. Normally it would be filled with the smell of sizzling rice cakes, hawkers shouting about fish, and children darting underfoot like loose coins. But now it's quieter, softer. Every motion feels careful, like the entire village doesn't want to spook the clouds. You wander between stalls. A potter is selling cloud-shaped incense burners. A butcher offers dried strips of meat blessed with dryness. Even the tailor has pinned tiny umbrella symbols onto her sashes. Gimmicks maybe, but the customers buy them. Everyone needs to feel like they're doing something. Near the edge of the square, you hear the low chant of a monk. Not from the village. A traveler, maybe. He sits beneath a pine tree, bald head, glinting bowl beside him empty, save for a single wet leaf. You pause. He opens one eye. The sky listens best, he says, when the ground is quiet. You nod, drop a coin in his bowl, and move on. At the far end of the square, the mayor, stooped, leathery and permanently scowling, is arranging a set of bronze mirrors. Rain mirrors. A tradition from older times, especially among those who favored Taoist rites over Buddhist ones. The idea was that if the sky saw its reflection, it might become bashful and cry. You resist the urge to laugh, but it's oddly poetic. The sun peeks out briefly and sends a glint flashing across the bronze straight into your eyes. You blink. Look up. A cloud moves across the sun. Not much, but enough to raise eyebrows. Gaius, who has appeared from somewhere with a pastry in each hand, points dramatically. She blinked. Lucilla groans. We're hallucinating. But she keeps watching. That afternoon, the air gets heavier. People start to whisper again. About omens, about signs. About rain dragons circling invisible above the mountains, tails curled around thunder. You sit on a stone wall watching a group of elders debate whether the king's prayers have been long enough. He should have fasted 3 more days, one insists. No, another says the priest didn't burn enough mugwort. A third sighs it's the astrologers. They didn't align the ceremony with the proper stars. Always the stars. Historians still argue whether these rituals were genuinely mystical or simply expressions of cosmic bureaucracy. Align this. Burn that. Face east. Hum in C sharp. The ingredients varied, but the goal remained the same: make the sky weep. The wind shifts. Someone sneezes. And then, as if on cue, the first drop falls. Not a torrent. Not a deluge. Just a single plump raindrop that hits your sleeve and leaves a tiny wet circle like a thumbprint. You freeze. Everyone else does too. Heads turn, eyes widen, a dozen necks crane upward at once. Another drop, this time on Lucilla's apron. She lets out a squeak, not quite joy, not quite disbelief, and points frantically. Then it begins. Light, scattered, hesitant, like the sky is testing its own plumbing. But still it's rain. You stand there, face tilted upward, eyes closed, feeling each drop like a blessing. A cool kiss, a promise fulfilled. People begin to laugh, to cheer. Some cry. A few kneel, murmuring thanks. One boy slips and falls into a puddle that hadn't existed 2 minutes ago and calls it the best moment of his life. Corvinus appears, drenched arms raised like a conductor at the start of a symphony. This, he yells, spinning. This is the fornicalia of water. You're not sure what that means, but you cheer anyway. The monk beneath the pine simply bows his head. The bronze mirrors fog. The incense burner goes out, and the sky weeps. You don't move for a long time. Just stand in it, soaking, grinning, humming a 7-beat tune under your breath. Not loudly, just loud enough that the sky might hear. The rain continues through the night. Not a storm. Not one of those melodramatic tempests that tears trees apart and floods doorways. Just soft, steady, persistent rain. The kind that soaks into deep and hums against rooftops like a lullaby for the thirsty. You lie awake not from worry but from wonder. Each drop on the roof sounds like a syllable. Like someone upstairs is slowly reading a very old poem. One the earth has been waiting to hear again. You sit up and walk to the door. The bakery is dark, quiet. Smells faintly of yeast and damp wood. You open the door and step outside barefoot. The street glistens. Stone reflects moonlight. Water pools in places you'd forgotten had dips. The dust is gone, replaced with the earthy, welcoming scent of life returning. Rain makes everything feel possible again. You lift your face and let it wash you. It doesn't sting. It blesses. Later the others rise too. Lucilla pads into the kitchen and stands at the threshold, arms crossed but smiling. Gaius arrives carrying a bowl like he's about to catch raindrops for soup. Even Secundus appears blinking as if the world has dared to surprise him. No one speaks, because sometimes even in a bakery words rise too slowly. You make tea. Share slices of bread that somehow feel richer than yesterday's batch, even if they aren't. Corvinus brings out a piece of old chalk and draws spirals on the floor. Spirals bring luck, he says. Or dizziness, Lucilla replies, but doesn't stop him. In the countryside beyond the city, shrines overflow. Not with gifts necessarily, though there are those too, but with presents. People coming, sitting, saying little. Lighting incense that fizzles slightly in the damp. At one mountaintop shrine, a group of elders light a bowl of pine needles and chant until steam rises from it like a signal flare. They don't ask for more rain. They give thanks. Down in the village, the river that had slowed to a crawl now bubbles over its banks like it can't wait to tell someone everything that happened while it was gone. Children are splashing. Elderly women stand in their doorways, arms crossed, watching with soft eyes and quiet mouths. And the king, he is reportedly still in his rain-waiting chamber. He hasn't left, because to leave before the rain fully stops would be prideful. You admire that, even though he probably has better cushions. Historians still argue whether the Korean kings truly believed in the power of their ritual seclusion, or whether it was more political theater. Either way, it was taken seriously. The idea that the monarch son of heaven could appeal to celestial forces was woven into the fabric of statecraft. You imagine the king sitting there now alone, no more attendants, no more incense, just him and the rain? Maybe he listens to the drops like you do, counting each one as a syllable in a divine reply. Back in the bakery, you begin prepping loaves again. But not just the usual orders. You add a new one, rain bread. It's not an official name, it's just what you call it. Same dough, same shape. But a sprig of mint in the center and a light scoring of cloud patterns on top. You don't even advertise it. Just make a few and set them out. People notice. One woman buys 3. Says she's going to give one to her neighbor because she prayed louder than I did. Another man asks, "What's the flavor?" You say hope, and a little mint. He nods solemnly, not catching the joke, and walks off munching with purpose. The best one goes to the shrine. You walk it there yourself. No fanfare, no one watching. Just you, the path, and the smell of wet earth. The statue of the local guardian is glossy with water like it's been crying. You leave the loaf at its base. Not as an offering, more like a thank you snack. The rain slows to a mist, then a hush. You stay there a while feeling the quiet settle. It doesn't feel like an ending. Just a pause between verses. You turn back not rushing. Your steps leave little prints that will vanish before the sun finds them. At the bakery, the oven is warm again. You press your palm to the brick and whisper, "Told you she'd come." It answers with a low creak. Not quite speech, but you know what it means. The next day the world glows. Not just from the sun, which makes a shy return casting slow gold across puddled courtyards and tile rooftops, but from the people. They walk differently now. Looser, lighter, Like the earth exhaled and everyone finally followed suit. Even the air smells like a miracle. You open the bakery windows to let it in. That rare, rich scent of wet woodstone and blooming things. Everything feels washed not just physically, but spiritually. Like the village pressed restart overnight, and now everyone is waking up just slightly better than before. Lucilla is already shaping dough by the time you arrive. She doesn't say hello, just nods once like the rain answered something you both forgot you'd asked. Gaius shows up late, but with a basket of wild greens he insists taste more green now that the drought's broken. You believe him. He's weird like that. Also occasionally right. You get to work. There are orders again. Not desperate, but celebratory. A priest wants a braided loaf for an offering. A neighbor requests a spiral-stamped bun for her niece born last night under the rain. Someone from the next village sends a scroll, 2 wreath loaves, one shaped like a fish. You don't ask why, you just bake. The fire in the oven catches easily. None of that sulky behavior from last week. The coals seem eager now, like they remember their purpose and are proud of it. You pat the bricks just once in gratitude. Outside children race through puddles. Someone sings a lullaby loudly and out of tune. The monk is still under his pine, but now he has company, an old woman sitting beside him, shelling peas and chatting like they've known each other their whole lives. You smile, but you also notice something curious. A delegation from the capital arrives. Not pompous, not loud, but noticeable. Silk robes, polished shoes, the kind of officials who travel with portable umbrellas even when the sun is shining. They speak to the mayor in hushed tones. They bow to the shrine, they bow again. Then they come to your bakery. You freeze mid-need. Lucilla mutters, "What now?" One of the officials steps forward, clears his throat, and says, "We heard you created rain bread." You blink, sort of. He nods. The Ministry of Rites would like a sample, for archival purposes. You're not sure what that means, but you hand him a fresh loaf still warm, scored with a spiral sprig of mint tucked in like a signature. He holds it like it's ancient treasure. The palace may request more. Gaius whispers we're going national. Lucilla whispers we're doomed. The officials leave, slowly, solemnly. Secundus, who's been lurking near the back doorway the entire time, finally speaks. Well, at least they didn't ask for dolphin shapes. That night you can't sleep. Not from stress, just from the residual hum of importance. You bake something, it mattered, even if just for a moment. You lie awake staring at the ceiling. And then because you're who you are, you get up. Slip into your apron. Light the oven. Not to fill orders, not to impress royalty, just to try something. You mix the dough slower this time. No mint, no swirls. Just the basics. But your hands remember more than they used to. You shape it differently, taller maybe. With a sloped edge and a ridge around the crown. Like the shape of a cloud drifting sideways. You don't know why. It just feels right. Historians still debate the origins of many traditional Korean loaves. Some say they came from China. Others insist they rose from shamanistic rituals shaped by dreams and skywatching. But some feel like they were dreamed into existence by someone who just wanted to give the sky a gift. You place the loaf in the oven. Watch it rise, crackle. Shift from pale to gold. When it's done, you don't taste it. You wrap it in cloth. Step outside. The moon is high, the village is quiet. You walk through the alleys barefoot like a ghost with purpose. At the edge of the village is a tiny shrine older than the bakery, older than the village, maybe older than history. No statue, just a stone. Cracked mossy, sleeping in the shade of 3 trees. You leave the loaf there. Not because anyone asked. Not because anyone will see, but because sometimes the sky says thank you in water. And you say it back in bread. Morning arrives on silent feet. You blink awake before the sun crests the mountains, the bakery still dark, the coals barely whispering warmth. The air smells faintly of last night's fire, of ash and old flour and oddly cypress. You sit up slowly, rubbing your face with dough-worn hands. Your body aches in familiar places, wrists, knees, shoulders. But your mind feels strangely clear, like someone swept out your thoughts with a clean birch broom. You remember the loaf, the one you left at the mossy shrine. You stretch, shuffle to the door and peer outside. The village is still asleep, windows closed. Roosters not yet convinced the day is worth announcing. You tug on a cloak and set off. The early air is crisp. Not cold exactly, but curious. Like it's still deciding what kind of day to become. You walk slowly, toes cold against the stone, passing closed shutters, and stacked firewood cats winding between your feet like sentient scarves. At the edge of the trees, you pause. The loaf is gone. Not broken, not half-eaten, not scattered. Just gone. In its place, someone has arranged a small ring of pine cones and flower petals. Delicate, oddly precise, almost ceremonial. You blink, kneel, touch nothing, because sometimes mystery is better unbothered. You whisper thanks for the exchange and turn back toward the bakery. Lucilla is already there when you return, hair tied up, sleeves rolled. She looks at you sideways. Where'd you go? Shrine, you say. She nods like that makes sense. Gaius arrives next, juggling a basket of eggs and muttering about roosters that crow too much for their own good. Corvinus tumbles in behind him, clutching a sticky rice cake and asking if bread can be shaped like a tiger today. You answer only if the tiger agrees. The day begins. Simple orders, simple joys. But something is shifting. More people come by than usual, not to buy, just to talk. A farmer brings radishes and tells you his daughter dreamed of clouds shaped like loaves. A traveler from another province says he heard about the bakery where it rains better. You're not sure what that means, but you smile and hand him a slice of warm barley roll. Later, an old woman with a walking stick appears. She doesn't introduce herself, just steps inside, looks around, nods once, and says, "Still clean." You offer her a seat, a cup of barley tea, a small heel of rye bread with sesame. She eats in silence, then asks, "Do you know how the rain rituals began?" You blink, shake your head. She smiles, and tells you, not in a grand theatrical voice, just gently, like passing a recipe down over tea. Long ago, before kings and monks and ministers, the people asked the sky for help directly. They'd sing, they'd dance, they'd cry into the soil, and sometimes they'd bake. Small loaves shaped like clouds, given to the wind. You pause, given how left where the wind could find them. Hills, trees, riverbanks. It wasn't about gods, really. It was about offering something made with care, so the sky would remember it cared too. She sips her tea. Then came the officials, the scrolls, the procedures. You both chuckle. She leaves a pebble on the counter before she goes. Round, smooth, speckled with mica. It glints when the sunlight finally arrives. You keep it. Historians still argue whether Korean rain rites evolved from agricultural necessity or deeper spiritual traditions tied to shamanism and animism. Some trace them to prehistoric fertility rites. Others link them to early Confucian adaptations. The truth likely swirls between all of them, part weather insurance, part cultural memory, part shared hope. Back in the bakery, you feel it more than ever. Bread is memory, and also message. You start making small cloud-shaped loaves again, no price, no name, just a basket near the door marked for sky things. People understand. They take one, leave something else, a petal, a coin, a joke written on a leaf. One kid drops in a beetle. You let it go before Lucilla finds out. Gaius carves a stamp shaped like a spiral cloud and begins pressing it into the loaves for fun. You catch yourself smiling more than usual. Even the oven seems lighter. You whisper, "You like this, don't you?" It doesn't answer. But the crust on the next batch is perfect. The next few days slide past in a kind of soft rhythm like dough slowly rising in a warm bowl. You wake, you mix, you bake, you sweep, and yet there's a different cadence to it now. Less frantic, more ceremonial. Not because of rituals, because of attention. People are watching. Not in a bad way, just more than usual. The bakery, once just a humble corner with good crust and decent jokes, now feels like it's humming on a slightly different frequency. Travelers come by with questions. Locals ask if you still have the sky bread. Someone even leaves a drawing on the door, a smiling cloud holding a tiny loaf. You tape it inside right by the window, why not? And every morning you make a small batch of those soft spiral loaves. The ones you never sell. You leave them in the basket, and the basket is always empty by nightfall. One afternoon a boy comes in with his grandmother. He's clutching a crumpled paper pouch and staring at the display case like it contains treasure and prophecy. You crouch to his level. He whispers, "Do you have the bread that brings dreams?" You blink, smile, depends on the dream. He says, "I want a dream of flying." You nod, reach behind the counter, and hand him a cloud-shaped bun, fluffy, light, brushed with honey. He grins like you gave him wings. You tell him to eat it slowly, think about wind. And maybe it'll help. He nods solemnly as if he's been entrusted with a powerful relic and walks out the door like someone stepping onto a sky bridge. Lucilla, who heard the whole thing, leans over. You know he's going to try jumping off something. You sigh. I know, but at least it'll be a small something. Gaius is the next to make something ridiculous. A mold shaped like a dragon. Not fierce, more like a long noodle with wings. He uses it to stamp one of the loaves, giggling the entire time. It's for the seasonal festival, he claims. Flying dragon bread. Guaranteed to inspire bravery. You ask bravery in who? In whoever eats it, or whoever has to explain it. You let him display it anyway. The loaf sells within 10 minutes. Even Secundus is quieter these days. Still stern, still muttering about moisture levels and how nobody respects barley, but softer around the edges. You catch him staring at the new sky shelf once the one where you leave the cloud loaves. He doesn't comment, just leaves a fennel biscuit beside it one morning and walks away. You think that counts as affection. One night after closing, Corvinus asks, "If we made a loaf big enough, do you think the rain goddess would eat it?" You pause, "Only if we shared." He nods thoughtfully, then adds, "I'd give her the crusty end." Same. Later that evening, you find yourself reorganizing the shrine. Not for any grand reason, just respect. You sweep away flower dust, straighten the offerings. You place a fresh sprig of pine next to the little clay fornax figurine. Then you tuck the pebble, the one from the old woman, just beneath it. Like a foundation. And beside it, you place a new loaf. This one's shaped like a moon, not a full circle, a crescent scored with tiny dots. You don't know why, it just feels right. Historians still argue about the role of baked goods in spiritual observance. Were they sacrifices and messages? Convenient snacks for tired gods? Some point to archaeological finds loaves placed in tombs shaped like celestial bodies. Others claim it was symbolic, offering the work of human hands to powers greater than weather or fate. You've stopped wondering. You know why you do it. Because making bread reminds you the world is still turning, that fire still transforms, that a spiral of dough shaped with care and placed beside a shrine might whisper something upward that no one else can hear. The bakery becomes a kind of quiet gathering place. Not a temple, not a school, just a space where flour becomes memory and everyone's welcome, as long as they wipe their feet and say something nice. You write new messages into the crust sometimes. Nothing dramatic. Just be kind. Dream big. Feed the ones you love. One afternoon, a young man comes in, buys a single loaf, holds it to his chest, and says, "I'm going to propose tonight." You nod. Hand him a wedge of mint honey bread. For luck. He blushes. She said her dream last night smelled like this. You wish him well, and try not to melt into a sentimental puddle. Because you get it. Bread is more than food. It's gesture, intention. Magic if you're patient enough. The next morning, there's a wreath of wildflowers hanging on your door. No note? You don't need one. You hang it inside the window and begin shaping the dough. One more spiral. For the sky. You start waking up a little earlier. Not because you need to, but because you want to. There's something about the dawn now, how the sky curls softly into light, how the air smells like wet stone and possibility. You find yourself drawn to it like steam to a kettle, rising with purpose and no rush. The bakery feels different in those early moments. Quiet, but not empty. The shadows stretch longer, the flour on the work table glows gold in the half-light, and the oven, still resting from the night before, seems to hum softly to itself. You begin your morning with a small cloud loaf, always one. Sometimes shaped like a swirl, sometimes like a droplet. Sometimes just a rough little lump that looks like nothing in particular, except maybe a shrug in dough form. You never sell it, you never eat it. You just make it, and leave it by the door. Lucilla eventually notices. You making secret breakfast for ghosts, she asks, arching an eyebrow. You shrug, maybe. She nods. Make one for my grandma, she liked crust. You do. It becomes habit. One for the sky, one for the past. People keep coming. Not in droves, not in crowds, but consistently. Kindly. Someone brings you a jar of plum paste because it seemed like something you'd like. Another leaves a tiny wooden spoon carved with a spiral handle. A child drops a crayon drawing of a rain goddess into your basket labeled Ms. Cloudfire. Gaius insists on making a loaf in her honor. He shapes it like a thunderbolt. It burns immediately, you don't tell him. Secondus tries it anyway. Tastes like ambition, he says, chewing stoically. Word gets around, not just about the bread, but about the mood, the feeling, the whispers that this place is good for dreaming. That something about the way you shape loaves invites softer thoughts. Gentler days? You don't argue. You're too busy baking. The market sends a request 50 spiral buns for a spring festival. You say yes, even though you know your wrists will ache. Lucilla preps the trays. Corvinus sings something tuneless but enthusiastic. Gaius burns exactly 2 batches before finding his rhythm. You shape each spiral with care. Twist, fold, tuck, like winding weather into a form you can chew. When the festival arrives, the buns sell out in under an hour. A potter trades you a rain-painted cup in exchange for 3. A flower vendor offers a bouquet that smells like mint and thunder. One girl hugs you, thanks you, and says she's had dreams every night since eating your bread. You ask what kind. She says flying jellyfish, and my grandpa. You tell her that sounds like the right kind of magic. Historians still argue whether medieval Korean communities truly believed that bread or food in general could carry intention into the elements. Some point to offerings made during gut rituals where symbolic items were left on altars or burned in small clay dishes to communicate with spirits. Others dismiss it as folklore grafted onto practical farming needs. You've stopped arguing with the historians, mostly because none of them ever show up to help need. One rainy morning, a traveler arrives soaked and beaming. She holds out a basket. Inside a loaf, stamped with a spiral. It's not perfect, she says, blushing. But I heard this is the place for people who believe in sharing weather. You invite her in. Make tea. Offer her a seat near the oven. Together you break the loaf in half. It's a bit dense, slightly underbaked, but warm, honest, offered. You tell her it's perfect. Later, after she's gone, you keep the other half. Place it near the shrine. Fornax doesn't say anything, but the crust cracks just a little, like a smile if bread could smile. The day softens. The rain continues, but gently. The bakery glows from within, lit by Cole's oil lamps and the kind of warmth that has nothing to do with temperature. Lucilla stands by the door. She says this is the best part. You ask what part? She waves a hand. The in-between, the part where people remember why we bake. You nod. Then you whisper, what if we made a new kind of loaf? She groans, not again. No, you say, simple, just for remembering, for anyone who needs it. Gaius overhears, says can we name it something mysterious like the sky remembers? Corvinus chimes in. What about Cloudbrain? You laugh and agree to both names. You make a batch, small, round, sprinkled with a bit of toasted barley, scored with a spiral always. You wrap them in linen and leave them on the windowsill with a tiny sign, take one, leave a thought. People do. Some leave pebbles, some leave folded notes. One person tucks in a pressed ginkgo leaf and a short poem about clouds. It becomes a ritual of its own, a slow kind of magic, an honest kind of sharing. You think maybe that's what rain rituals always were, not about making water fall, but making something else rise. Hope, memory, bread. You keep baking, even when your wrists ache, even when someone forgets to refill the flour jar, even when Corvinus accidentally drops an entire tray and then tries to blame the wind. You bake because it matters, because someone somewhere still needs a reason to believe the sky might be listening. And bread is a pretty good whisper. You don't realize it's become a thing until the prefect shows up. He doesn't knock. He doesn't announce himself. He just walks in one rainy morning cloak, dripping hands tucked behind his back, like a man who both knows his power and wishes he didn't have to use it on bakers. You freeze mid-need. Gaius drops a mixing spoon. Lucilla mutters, not again, even though nothing like this has happened before. The prefect surveys the shop. His eyes pass over the shelves, rows of golden spirals. The new Cloudbrain loaves the wrapped bundles of barley buns and mint rolls. He pauses at the window where someone has left a tiny wooden fox, beside a message that reads, thank you for the dreams. He clears his throat. I'm not here on official business. You nod slowly. Okay. I heard he continues that you make rain bread. There's a silence in the room, the kind that feels like the air itself is listening. You glance at the others, then back to him. We make bread, you say. Sometimes people eat it during storms. He nods, slowly. I'd like two. One for my wife, one for me. You don't ask why, you just wrap them gently. Add a sprig of pine to each ribbon. He pays in full, plus extra. Then, almost as an afterthought, he turns at the door and says, she hasn't slept through the night in months. If this helps, I'll forget the bread tax is overdue. He leaves before you can respond. Lucilla blinks. We have a bread tax. No, says Gaius, but I think we just earned an exemption. After that, more visitors come. Quietly, softly, like they're joining a secret club. One old man claims your spiral loaf helped his joints. A woman says her toddler stopped crying during thunderstorms if she was allowed to nap with a warm crust beside her cheek. Someone donates a cushion to the bench near the oven. It starts to feel like something sacred. You build a small shelf for offerings. Nothing fancy, just a plank of wood with a carved edge. You place the original Fornax figurine there, the soldier's plaque, a painted pebble from a child, and the first spiral loaf you ever made that didn't burn. Historians still debate whether bakeries in medieval Korea served as community centers or spiritual hubs. Some argue that monks used them for quiet acts of care. Others suggest wandering shamans left charms in ovens to absorb divine heat. There are folk tales about bread that brings calm loaves shaped like raindrops used in temple rituals. You start thinking less like a baker and more like a keeper of quiet spells. You make a new loaf, a triple spiral. You don't know why. It just feels needed. It sells immediately. Someone says it reminded me of my mother's lullaby. Another whispers I had a dream it would look like this. You start getting letters, folded carefully, tucked under trays. One reads, I hadn't prayed in 10 years, but this bread made me want to whisper again. You cry in the storeroom for 5 minutes, then go back to kneading. Even Secundus seems moved. He sweeps without grumbling, polishes the oven mouth. Once you catch him rearranging the offerings on the shelf with a tenderness so casual it's almost embarrassing. He shrugs. Even fire deserves a shrine. One day a foreign traveler comes in. She carries a tiny loaf carefully wrapped in linen. It's from Jeju, she says. My grandmother made it during dry seasons. We sang while it baked. You hold the loaf gently. The crust is cracked in a way you've never seen, spiraling inward like a shell. You offer her a trade, one of yours for one of hers. She smiles, a fair exchange. You eat hers that night. It tastes of sea air and toasted hope. The next morning you start experimenting with saltwater dough. It doesn't rise properly, but it smells like memory. And that's enough. The shop evolves. Not drastically, just in feeling. You hang wind chimes by the window. Gaius brings feathers to tie to the baskets. Lucilla presses sage into the corners of the prep room. You start stamping small spiral marks into the corners of your parchment wraps. People start calling it the bakery that listens. You don't advertise, you don't boast. You just keep baking. And listening. One morning a girl comes in soaked from the rain. She doesn't speak. She just places a handful of wild violets on the counter and points at the sky loaves. You give her two. She nods once and leaves. Later that evening you find a note where she stood. My brother loved storms. These will help us remember him. You hold it for a long time. The sky rumbles, and you need softer that night. Like someone whispering into dough, like someone folding silence into something that can feed a family. Or a heart. Or a memory. You light the oven, just enough for glow, and place a loaf inside. It doesn't matter if it sells. Some bread is meant to be made even if no one eats it. Especially then. Word count 100. Awaiting continue. Banja noi continue. ChatGPT ja noi section danint. You lose count of the spirals. At first you try to tally them, each new loaf stamped with that signature curl a symbol, a wish, a kind of edible talisman. You mark down names, numbers, who took what and why. But it gets away from you. There are too many. Too many reasons, too many hopes wrapped in flour and tucked into linen. So you stop counting and start remembering instead. Not in numbers, but in moments. The woman who kissed her spiral before placing it on her father's grave. The man who said nothing, just held it to his chest like a candle. The child who brought a painted rock as payment. You gave her the biggest one you had. The bakery changes in quiet ways. People arrive before sunrise now, not to rush, but to sit. You start leaving a pot of barley tea on the side table. Someone adds cushions. Another leaves a basket of dried citrus peels with a note. For when the air needs cheering. Secundus builds a shelf from an old door and installs it above the hearth. Memory shelf, he grunts, then walks away. You find a place for the pebble, the fox, the rain cup. Gaius adds the burnt thunderbolt loaf carefully shellacked so it won't crumble. Lucilla claims a corner for bread-shaped experiments that failed gracefully. Her rosewater anise twist is there. Smells amazing. Tastes like perfumed sawdust. She insists it's medicinal. You all laugh more. And cry more. People tell you things now. Things they've never said before. Stories they pour out while choosing a loaf like it's safer to speak among crusts and coals. One man tells you about a brother lost to illness. He liked the rain, he said it made the world quieter. Easier. A woman arrives with a wedding veil in her bag. He proposed over a barley bun, she explains. Your bakery saved us 3 arguments and a very bad poem. You start baking more at night. Not because of demand, but because the oven feels gentler then. The coals glow like they're dreaming and the walls whisper heat without rushing you. You make a loaf with lavender. Call it hush bread. Lucilla raises an eyebrow. You naming them now. You nod, helps them know what they're for. She doesn't argue. Historians still debate the role of naming in food ritual. Some say it was symbolic magic assigning purpose through language. Others think it was marketing before markets. Either way, it matters. You bake a new loaf the next day. A blend of rye, honey, and fennel. Dense, warm, resilient. You call it stay. People buy it before you finish explaining. Someone asks for a recipe. You say it changes every time. A traveling musician performs outside your door. Just one song during a light drizzle. You give him bread. He gives you a melody. Corvinus hums it for days. One morning you find an old woman sweeping the stoop. She doesn't work here. She just says, the dreams you're feeding need clean steps. You don't argue. There's a woman who comes every Thursday. Buys 1 loaf, leaves 1 apple, always the same. One day you ask why. She looks at you and says, because I'm still here. And then leaves. You start writing short phrases on small slips of parchment and tucking them into loaves. Not everyone, just a few. A kind of bread fortune. Some are silly need, more worry less. Some are gentle. The sky forgets nothing, and neither do I. One simply says yes. A man returns with tears in his eyes. He holds up the note. I needed this. You nod. He doesn't explain. He doesn't have to. Lucilla finds one of your notes tucked in a basket and reads it aloud. The moon is just a loaf waiting to rise. She glares at you. You're writing poetry now. You shrug. Only if it bakes well. The rain returns for a week straight. And no one complains. In fact, more people come. Dripping coats, wet shoes, warm hands reaching for warm crusts. You have to bake faster. Gaius sets up an assembly line. Corvinus invents a dance for when he scores dough. It's terrible. You all love it. Secundus adds a second oven, smaller, older, pulled from a friend's shop in Trastevere. You call it the little furnace and bless it with a rosemary wreath. That night, the fire takes instantly. You whisper she approves. Lucilla lights a candle and leaves it there. Just because you hang a wind chime above the door. It doesn't ring unless someone laughs while leaving. Then it sings. You leave the door open longer. The rain doesn't come in. Only people. Only stories. Only that hush of a storm remembered and respected. You realize one evening while cleaning a stubborn patch of flour from the floor that you're not afraid of silence anymore. It used to mean something was wrong. Now, it just means the bread is listening. You wake up to fog. Not the kind that creeps in with menace, but the kind that wraps the world in soft cotton and quiets the street before the first cart rattles past. You sit on the edge of your pallet and just breathe. Today will be slow. Not lazy, just deliberate. Like the world is inviting you to measure your flour a little more mindfully. Stir your dough with care. Smile without rushing. The bakery hums with the stillness of early morning. You're the first one in. You sweep the hearth before you light the coals, and for once the bricks don't protest. They just hold the warmth gently the way an old friend offers you a blanket instead of advice. You light a candle at the Fornax shrine and don't say anything out loud. She knows. Today is the day of the spiral walk. You didn't plan it, not exactly. But over time, people started asking if they could come in and just walk. Not talk, not eat. Just move in a circle around the ovens, hands brushing walls, eyes soft with remembering. So you made room. You moved the prep tables a little, laid down a path of flour lines and grain winding gently from door to back and back again. A spiral, always the spiral. By midday, the first visitors arrive. A woman with a basket of citrus peels, a boy holding a feather, a man with weathered sandals and a loaf wrapped in cloth. One by one, they remove their shoes, step inside, follow the spiral. They don't rush. Some whisper, some breathe like they're tasting the air. One kneels at the halfway point and weeps not loudly, just enough to fog up the space around him. You offer him a roll when he finishes. He accepts it like a relic. The spiral becomes a regular thing. Every seventh day people come. Not for spectacle, not for sermons. Just for the hush. Lucilla tries it once, says she doesn't get it. Comes back the next week anyway. You catch Gaius laying out tiny dried petals along the flower line when no one's watching. Corvinus makes a miniature spiral from sesame seeds near the corner of the oven. Doesn't tell anyone. You notice anyway. The walk becomes its own kind of prayer. Not to a god, to a rhythm, to a memory, to the quiet inside bread before it rises. Historians still argue whether spirals in ancient and medieval rituals were symbolic of time journey or rebirth. Some claim they were practical, a path to slow the mind. Others see them as marks of cosmic order. You don't care. To you, it just feels right. One morning, a stranger arrives before dawn. She says nothing, just gestures to the spiral path. You nod. She walks it barefoot slow. When she finishes, she takes out a tiny loaf, unwraps it. Inside the crust scored carefully your symbol. The spiral. She hands it to you, bows, then leaves. You hold it for a long time. Later, you place it on the memory shelf. Add a sprig of rosemary beside it. By now, the shelf is crowded, full of tokens, pressed herbs, burnt spoons, a bent coin someone said was lucky enough to lose. You don't curate it, you just let it grow. The oven accepts it. She always does. Sometimes after the shop closes, you sit and read the notes people leave. Some are prayers. Some are jokes. One just says, "This helped." You whisper, "I know." That day, you try a new recipe. Again. Because habits are not chains, they're doors. You open them gently. You bake a loaf using mulberry flour borrowed from a tea seller who claimed it tasted like summer giving up. He was right. It's strange and soft and earthy like rain in July. You name it, linger. You only make it once a month. It always sells out. Lucilla suggests you start writing a book. Recipes and spirals, you could call it bread for weather. Gaius pitches Yeast in Peace, my crusty memoir. Corvinus votes for How to Bake Without Crying Too Much. You write none of it down. Not yet. But you think about it. Maybe someday. Maybe not. Some things are better passed hand to hand. Warm, imperfect, alive. One foggy evening, a group of children shows up with drawings, crayon sketches of loaves, fire, and spirals. One depicts the oven with a smiling face. Another has wings. You hang them all. Secundus shakes his head. You've turned this place into a temple. You smile. Is that a complaint? He pauses. No, just an observation. That night, you light one extra candle. You place it by the memory shelf, and beside it a fresh spiral loaf. Still warm, still humming. The wind outside shifts. The spiral waits. And somewhere deep inside the oven, something exhales. It's the kind of morning that smells like toast. Not fresh toast, but the memory of it like the air still carries yesterday's warmth and wants to offer it again. You stand in the doorway, hands in your apron, and just watch the light roll over the stones. It's quiet, but not empty. Inside the bakery moves with a rhythm that needs no words. The dough rests where it should. The oven glows like a held breath. The shrine has a new ribbon. Someone left a soft teal thread wrapped around the neck of the terracotta oven charm. You nod at it, then get to work. Today you're making community bread. No names, no payments, just loaves for the hands that need them. You leave a basket outside the door with a sign, take what you need, leave what you can, or nothing at all. Some mornings it empties in minutes. Other days someone adds to it cheese, olives, herbs, even a pot of jam once with a note. For the crusts you save me from. You start baking extra on purpose. Lucilla calls them your ghost loaves. Says they're for all the people who don't know how to ask. Gaia starts slipping notes into them. Not advice, not encouragement, just stories. One is about a chicken that learned to peck bread without tipping the basket. Another is a terrible haiku about dough. You make a habit of checking the basket before sunrise. Today it's already half gone. A piece of linen has been folded neatly on top, pressed with a flower. You don't recognize the blossom, but it smells faintly of lemon and something older. You tuck it onto the memory shelf. Then you go back inside to the heat and the heartbeat. That evening something strange happens. You're shaping a batch of barley loaves when the door opens without sound. No bell, no knock. A woman stands there, not old, not young. Wrapped in layers of russet and ivory, she carries nothing. At first you think she's a customer, but she doesn't speak. Just steps forward, walks the spiral, and stops at the oven. She places her hand flat on the brick, and the fire inside flickers once, like breath held and released. You watch without moving. She turns finally and looks at you. Her eyes are dark, not cold, not warm, just deep like wells filled with stories too long to recite. She smiles. Then she leaves. No bread, no payment, no explanation. You don't follow. You just look at the oven. The flame has steadied. No smoke, no crackle. Just quiet. That night, you place a small loaf in the shrine, just flour, salt water, a twist of fennel, and whisper, "If that was you, thank you." No reply. But you feel full. The next day, people bring things. Not for sale, for sharing. A basket of persimmons, a jar of wind-dried herbs, a reed flute with one note always slightly off. Someone leaves a carved wooden spoon with the word again etched into the handle. You hang the spoon above the hearth. It becomes part of the rhythm. Corvinus begins making a new kind of roll tied like a knot glazed with honey sprinkled with something he refuses to name. He calls it luck. It's terrible, and somehow perfect. People buy it just for the name. Lucilla paints tiny spirals on parchment and tucks them into bread wrappings. A blessing for breakfast, she says, even if it's just toast. Gaius composes a song about flour. No one wants to hear it twice. He sings it anyway. The bakery breathes with layers now. Heat, stories, gifts, losses, hopes. Every loaf holds more than just ingredients. Every hand that takes one feels something linger. Historians still argue about the psychological impact of community baking rituals. Some call it placebo, others ritual memory. One scholar wrote that bread becomes a medium of collective grief, joy, and transformation. You think that's probably true, but you just call it comfort. A mother comes in holding her daughter's hand. The girl clutches a small coin. The mother whispers she's saving for her first loaf. You kneel. What kind? The girl thinks then says one with a spiral. Of course. You hand it to her still warm. She clutches it like a treasure. The coin, you give it back. She insists, so you drop it in the offering bowl. That night you sit by the hearth. Just you and the coals. You place a new charm on the shrine, this one a little silver spiral. A gift from someone who never gave their name. You lean back. The fire flickers gently. And you remember a time when all you knew was flour and fear. When shaping dough felt like guessing. Now you shape it like a sentence. And the oven finishes the thought. You wake to a rare thing in Rome rain. Soft, not storming. A steady drizzle that hushes the rooftops and slicks the cobblestones outside your shuttered window. You listen to it for a long time before moving, letting the rhythm of droplets on clay lull your bones into motion. The bakery feels different in the rain. Cooler. Quieter. The air is thicker, carrying the scent of ash, damp grain, and last night's herbs still clinging to the counter. You don't rush to light the oven. You just sit on the work table and watch the light shift through the doorway. Somewhere out there, someone is cursing wet sandals and another is sipping something warm, both unaware they're part of the same weather. Eventually you move. It's not laziness, it's reverence. Days like this are for slow, kneading, long proofs, crusts that crack gently, not dramatically. Lucilla arrives hair damp, holding a bundle under her cloak. Mail, she says, mostly bills, and this. She sets down a small scroll tied with red thread. No seal, no name. Inside, a single line handwritten. If you bake it in the rain, let the sky taste it too. You both stare at it. Well, Gaius says from the door already dripping. Looks like today we're baking outside. Of course. You build a small fire in the alley's shelter shielded by clay tiles. A makeshift oven, more experiment than engineering. A few bricks and iron plate, a lot of hope. The first attempt burns. The second never rises. But the third blooms like a secret soft-crusted, lightly blistered, faintly sweet. Rain-spiced. You call it sky loaf. Word spreads faster than steam. By midday, people arrive, some with cloaks, some with drenched curls plastered to their cheeks. No one complains. They hold out hands for slices. They whisper compliments like confessions. A woman offers a poem. A child offers a worm. Both are accepted. You bake until the rain slows. And even then you leave one loaf uncovered just to see what the sky might do. That night you find Gaius asleep near the bricks curled around a cooling pan like it's a cat. You drape a cloth over him and head inside. The bakery glows with its usual warmth. Familiar, safe. But you don't light the big oven tonight. Instead, you write a note and pin it above the prep table: rain loaves only in spring. Limit one per dream. Lucilla snorts when she sees it, doesn't take it down. Corvinus brings in a basket of wild thyme he found near the aqueduct. For the next weird one, he says, eyes wide with that dangerous glint of invention. You nod, weird ones only. The oven's getting bored. You try the thyme in a new shape, braided folded inward like an embrace. It smells like stories not yet told. And it sells out before it cools. You think of the rain scroll often. No signature, no return address, just an invitation to let the weather speak. You've kept it. It lives on the memory shelf now beside the oven charm, the spiral coin, and a now wilted blossom. You don't reread it often, you just let it sit absorbing warmth. One evening, a traveler stops in, wears a cloak stitched with stars, orders nothing, just sits at the window and hums. Before leaving, they press a small parcel into your palm. Inside a dried fig, a feather, and a sprig of pine. No note. You bake the fig into a tiny loaf the next morning. It doesn't rise much, but it's delicious. Historians still argue whether rain baking was ever a thing. Some call it superstition, others call it a desperate adaptation. You think maybe it's just honesty, letting the sky be a guest in your kitchen. Lucilla makes fun of you. Then she bakes a loaf shaped like a cloud. Sells it for triple. The bakery hums louder these days, not from noise, from presence. You start seeing offerings from people you don't know. Tiny tokens tucked between flour sacks or perched beside the oven door. One day it's a folded paper crane, another day a painted stone with a single word again. You never see who leaves them, but you never feel alone. You start journaling your loaves, not recipes, memories. Baked during a thunderstorm, gave half away. Shaped like a bell, broke in half, still rang. Tasted like something I forgot and remembered again. The entries get weirder. So do the loaves, but no one minds. They come for the bread. They stay for the hush. And you somehow are both baker and pilgrim. A woman comes in with a bundle of fabric, inside a newborn. She whispers, "Can I leave a loaf for his naming day?" Of course. You shape it small, round, gently scored. Place a sprig of mint on top. When she returns the next day, she leaves a new note. We're calling him Crustus. No regrets. You pin the note on the wall. Gaius threatens to write a ballad. Lucilla actually does. You don't sing along, but you smile. You wake with the thought already formed: today is the last loaf of the season. Not the last forever. Just the last before things shift. Before summer truly arrives with its sticky mornings and blistering heat that makes even the oven sweat. You know the signs. The flour clumps faster. The dough ferments louder. Even the bread has a shorter temper. So today you decide will be the closing note. One final piece in the quiet music of the year's baking. You arrive at the bakery before the light changes color. Just you and the gentle creak of shutters opening to an empty street. You don't light the fire yet. First you listen. There it is. The soft breath of the oven bricks cooling from yesterday's warmth. A sound you've learned to hear like a whisper behind the noise of the city. You walk the spiral once. Hands brushing the memory shelf. Eyes tracing the little tokens, each one a reminder of what fire and flour and time can become. There's no recipe for today, no orders, just instinct. You mix slowly, knead with care. Lucilla arrives halfway through holding 2 cups of watered wine and a reed whistle she found at the market. For the send-off, she says, handing you 1 cup and promptly trying to play the whistle. It sounds like a duck being surprised. Gaius wanders in with a loaf from the day before, already missing a wedge. Just doing quality control, he claims, chewing loudly. Corvinus trails behind now up to your shoulder, carrying a bag of fennel seeds and a question about whether bread can be cube-shaped. You assure him it can. Should it? Another discussion entirely. You all bake together but quietly. Each one shapes something different. Lucilla's is a sunburst. Gaius makes a pretzel constellation. Corvinus, against all odds, does make a cube. You shape yours simple, round. Scored once, spiraled once. Then just before you slide them into the oven, you pause. You add a pinch of salt with your fingers, not stirred in, just pressed lightly into the center. Because endings like beginnings deserve a mark. The loaves bake beautifully. Even the cube rice is true. As they cool, the door opens softly, almost shy. And in comes Secundus. He's older now, slower. Eyes more tired, or maybe just seeing more than you realized before. He walks straight to the oven, rests a hand on the bricks, and sighs. Still standing, he says, "You nod, still warm." He turns to you and adds, "I dreamed of fornax last night." You raise an eyebrow. Was she judging your crust? She smiled, he says. Didn't say a word. Just looked at me and smiled. You smile too, because you've had that dream. Or maybe one like it. You hand him a slice of the last loaf. He eats it slowly. Says nothing. But you see it in his face. Approval. That afternoon, the shutters stay open longer than usual. The loaves cool on the sill, perfuming the street. Children pass by and giggle. An old woman asks if the bread shaped like the sun will make her tan faster. Gaia says yes. Lucilla says it depends where she puts it. The laughter lingers. Near evening, Corvinus lights the altar candle and places the last slice at the shrine. For later, he whispers, "You don't say anything, because it's perfect." You all sit by the doorway, feet on the cool stones, sipping the last of the wine and letting the day fold inward. It's the kind of moment no historian will ever record. No scroll will preserve it, no official marker, no empire, no temple. Just 4 bakers and an oven and the end of a good day. But it's real. And the fire remembers. The next morning you rise early again. But not to bake, just to walk. You pass through the market before it wakes the stalls draped in quiet cloth. The river glitters like a polished coin. The breeze smells faintly of wheat and ash. You reach the hill where the old road splits one path to the heart of the city, the other toward the fields. And you look back. The bakery is just barely visible. A small place, but full of work, of warmth, of stories. And maybe of watching eyes that flicker in flame. You press your fingers together like kneading without dough, then turn toward the fields, just to see what grows next.